Texas Governor Greg Abbott has declared an invasion of the southern border and deployed the Texas National Guard, Department of Public Safety, and local law enforcement. Per the governor, the state is also building a border wall, razor wire, and marine barriers. They're also just straight up repelling migrants. Per unpublished federal data obtained by CBS News, border crossings have surged in the month of September to near record levels. Per Customs and Border Protection agents apprehended some 140,000 migrants crossing the southern border without authorization in the first 20 days of September. This is a 60% increase over the same period in July.
White House Press Secretary Jean-Pierre clashed with Fox News' Peter Doocy over the bubbling crisis in the briefing room yesterday. Let's watch.
What do you call it here at the White House when 10,000 people illegally cross the border in a single day?
So what do you call it, Peter, when GOP puts forth wait, no, you can't. I'm answering. Okay, we're going to move
You're answering
on.
the question.
No, we're moving on.
Great,
moving.
please.
In the back.
You said you were stopping the flow at the border.
No. I tried to answer, Peter.
Okay.
I tried to answer the question. You stopped me. Let's go.
Now, Republicans have derided President Biden's quote-unquote open border policies for the surge. The president himself, however, said last night that MAGA Republicans are the problem.
Piece of legislation introduced. On my first day in office, I sent an immigration reform bill to the Congress, one that recognizes immigrants' contributions to this country, provides a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, temporary status holders, farm workers, and others. We need our colleagues to act. For decades, immigration reform has been a bipartisan in this country. Unfortunately, the mega Republicans in Congress and my predecessor spent 4 years gutting the immigration system under my predecessor. They continue to undermine our border security today, blocking bipartisan reform. So until Congress acts.
Staff writer at The Hill, Rafael Bernal, joins us now to discuss. Good to see you, Rafael.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So to President Biden's point, we've seen some bipartisan work on immigration reform throughout the decades. Thus far, there has not been anything that I would argue would be conclusive in terms of not only reducing border crossings, but also addressing some of the crises that are associated with the migrant crossings themselves. What do you think should be done? Also, why have we seen this football punted time and time again, regardless of who the president happens to be?
I mean, it's a very simple issue to politicize because it's an issue where, fear mongering is common. A big win on immigration could net one party or the other, significant goodwill from a lot of Latino communities, not all of them, but also, a lot of immigrant communities. But the biggest voting bloc there is the Hispanics in the Southwest are likely to respond well. So basically, the hot potato has been thrown around for 30 years. Biden's point is a little confusing. It's not just the Trump administration that dismantled the immigration system, so, though they did try that, and they did break a few things in the process. They made like work permit processing slower, for instance, so that kind of thing. But it's not the Trump administration who created the immigration laws that we have now. That the biggest issue they have is they don't fit conditions. Like, these are laws for a world that doesn't exist, and they were designed. If you need to blame anyone for creating the current unrealistic expectations at the border, you'd have to go back and blame Newt Gingrich for the deal he struck with President Clinton back in '96. So President Biden's statement is sort of, I'd rate it half accurate, and certainly most immigration advocates are very tired, and they've said so very explicitly. They're just tired of the president saying, it's Congress's responsibility. Yes, we know it is Congress's responsibility. Everybody knows that. But the other thing that everybody knows on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of this issue, is that Congress is very, very unlikely to act in a significant way on immigration reform.
Well, and also, Rafael, there are executive authorities that are available for the president to try to address this crisis as well. He unveiled in that same speech his plan for the border crisis, which he says includes fast-tracking processing, expanding legal pathways for citizenship, increasing the total number of refugees, sending money to sanctuary cities. The list goes on. But all of those bullet points would really increase the pull factors for migrants to cross the border. So without that being coupled with border security, I just wonder, what is the Texas governor supposed to do without federal assistance?
So there's two things there. The pull factor, the major pull factor is one that the United States doesn't want to get rid of, which is that we have a strong economy that is, attracting workers who are not reaching their premium productivity levels in their home economies. And that is to say, somebody who is good at any skill in Venezuela will generate, X amount of economic output, and can generate like 5 or 10 times that economic output with the same skill set in the United States. So that pull factor is sort of permanent. And like I said, nobody wants to get rid of a better economy than the rest of the continent. Then there is the idea of border security stopping this continuous flow of migrants. It's very hard without violating human rights in a way that I think most Americans would probably not be comfortable with. And the bigger issue is that migration has become commoditized by smuggling networks that are not necessarily the cartels, but either pay the cartels for use of cartel controlled territory, or are some loosely associated with the cartels. Possibly that association might be getting tighter, but we still don't know that. But the fact is, migrants are coming. These smuggling organizations are making it relatively easy for migrants to come. There is a pathway for them, and the United States isn't equipped to process these people legally and absorb them into the economy. But that's a problem with U.S. laws. That is not a problem. That's not necessarily the migrants' fault, and that's not the U.S. economy's fault.
And Rafael, despite the major issues, the human rights issues up to and including death that are occurring at the border, we still see large droves of people who are willing to take that risk. At what point is there a discussion or a conversation around not only the illegality of what we're seeing come particularly from Texas and Texas governor's leadership there, but also ways in which we can help to mitigate this? Originally, the conversation was around asylum. Everyone that is coming and crossing the Texas border is not seeking asylum. But in ways in which we know that the economy may be not stable in places where, especially in the Northern Triangle countries. However, we're seeing individuals continue to come in droves, meanwhile having mass human rights violations and an American economy and an American level of instability when it comes to taking in many of these people that is not really working. Chicago is having issues with housing, in addition to several other issues surrounding by communities that aren't necessarily extremely excited about this influx. Same thing we're seeing happening in New York. What are some areas in which we can see levels of development, not only for those who are already here, the migrants that we have currently enveloped, but also to help quell some of what we're seeing at the border that doesn't include levels of what I would consider not only human rights violations, but extreme violence?
Right. And President Biden did he made a shift. He doesn't want to call it a shift. He wants to say his immigration policy has been very consistent. But in naming and redesignating Venezuela for temporary protected status, he basically allowed all Venezuelans who were in the United States up to, I think it was July 31st of this year, he allows them to work and live in the country for at least 18 months. And that's 440 something thousand people, nearly 500,000 people who can now get their work permits, get to work. And that's really, and the issue really has become an issue of absorption. So if you have a large group of people, 100,000 migrants in New York, for instance, who have to sit around in shelters because they don't want to violate immigration law by working illegally, then you have a shelter problem. If you have 100,000 Venezuelans who have work permits who are very willing to work. I mean, in large part, that's what they are here for to make a better living than they could have in Venezuela. There's also the factor of fearing that particular government. But if you allow them to work, is the thinking of many Democrats and presumably the administration in making this move, then it will be easier. They will be absorbed into the economy. There's already a lot of immigrant communities that might be happy to take them. And sure, there's communities in the United States who are not happy to take new migrants, but there are also communities that are less likely to be, absorbing this new workforce.
Yeah, I'm curious about that last point about how the policy should differentiate between places that are willing to accept the migrants and ones that aren't. Because, I think the fundamental issue with Texas and what Governor Abbott is doing is he's saying, I don't want these policies. I would rather have tighter border security. Texans don't want me to absorb these migrants, and that's why I'm either sending them elsewhere or now declaring this invasion to prevent the massive flow of migrants coming across the border. Recently we saw the Democrats getting kind of huffy-puffy with Eric Adams in New York because he expressed similar concerns that Governor Abbott has previously with the ability of United States infrastructure and funding to be able to take care of these people once they get into the country. So why the different tone from the White House between Eric Adams and what he's saying in New York and now what Governor Abbott is declaring in Texas?
Well, Eric Adams made the White House very uncomfortable for a long time. Though he did celebrate this decision to grant TPS to Venezuelans. So that might be a little bit of healing in that rift, but the damage is done. And frankly, Democrats didn't want to attack one of their own the way they would attack any Republican who would have said half of what Eric Adams said. They would have frankly pulled the bigotry card. And a lot of immigrant advocates did pull the bigotry card on Eric Adams for what he said. But Democrats want to avoid infighting. The fact that Eric Adams did celebrate the TPS decision is very good news for Biden, frankly, because they don't want that noise during the campaign. And on the invasion point, I guess it's really a matter of intentionality. What Peter Doocy was asking in the White House press room, it is a question worth asking. Is an invasion, the act of there's a group of people who were not here before and now they are here and maybe they want to work or maybe they just want to flee danger? Or does an invasion imply that the group of people would have to be here with hostile action? Obviously, we know where Abbott stands on this. We know where the administration, most Democrats and most immigrant and human rights advocates stand on the other side. They're saying that it's not an invasion because it's not an army that's coming. And the debate really, put it this way, the Colombians absorbed over the course of, I believe, 3 years, something like 2 million Venezuelans. And they had their issues. It was difficult on some schools, especially sort of social services were the most strained part of that relationship. But they did it. And it was largely a successful, let's say, asylum process.
All right. We got to leave it there, Rafael. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back with more Rising after this.